Buenas tardes, good afternoon to everybody. I'm going to explain one difference in between to be from the Mediterranean or to be from another country. The last time we had our talk, and 1 minute before there was nothing, there was nobody, it was empty. And today, half an hour before, is full. It's just a little difference in between Latins and another country. Okay, this is I am José Martín, co-founder of Pollença Properties. We have a sales department, rental department, and we make renovations as well. And today we want to explain to the clients and to everybody the new rental law, which is very important because since the last summer will make a big difference in between the previous law and the new law. With me we have Charlie and Ben, is the rental team, and then from Illeslex, Javier and Guillermo will explain you in detail all we need to know about the new rental law in order to have a good rentals without any issue in front of the new issues we are going to see in the next coming year with the new rental law. At the end, I have to tell you that we are going to have something special. Today we are going to have a coffee cocktail from Marc Dolça. It's a bar from Pollença. He's barista. And then we are going to have as well a glass of wine, and we can have a chat in between all of us. And then when Javier and Guillermo finish, you can make all the questions you want. We are very open to it. Thank you for coming, and let's start.
Hi, thanks Jose. I think you can probably all hear me without a microphone. So, myself and Charlie set up Pollença Rentals 2 years ago. A bit of background to us for those of you that don't know us or don't work with us yet. So we opened 2 years ago to support the sales team in Pollença Properties. Over the last 2 years, it was just Charlie and myself. There's now a bigger team, more properties, bigger office. Well, we've got to move offices because we've already outgrown the one we've got. So we're a new company, but we're not new to what we do. I've been here for 16 years, always working in tourism. Charlie's been here for 12 years, and Jose's been working in sales and tourism since he was about so big. We're based in Pollença, just down the road in Cariacudia. We're in Pollença all year round, so we don't come and go. We're here 365 days a year. We specialise in renting out townhouses, places that are a bit different, a bit more unusual, obviously, as well as the standard villas that are rented everywhere and through most of the companies. All the properties we rent are legal, obviously. I can't get away with that anymore with Javier sat here. There's a lot of people here tonight, but there's a lot that couldn't make it. So everything's been videoed. This will be available to you. If you've missed anything in the presentation, we'll send it out afterwards. And we're sending it out to a lot of the people that can't join us. They've also sent some questions, so I know a lot of you have got questions for when these are finished, but I've got some emails, so you won't be the only one that asks a question. Any information you want about renting through us, buying through us, selling through us, myself, Charlie, who else is here? Joanne, sales agents are all at the back. We've all got our name tags on. Can we give us a shout afterwards, and we'll go through anything you need to know. Okay, thank you very much. Charlie, it's all yours.
I stand here about me in the camera. Hi everyone. Yeah, so I'm Charlie. Actually, it's quite weird. I've been here for 12 years, but there's loads of people I don't recognise. It's really great. There's new people to meet potentially. I own my own house, which I also rent out. So I kind of understand some of the challenges that people go through in terms of the worries about licences and eco-tax and how confusing it all is. And I've worked with quite a few owners to help sort all those things out. I've also rented villas myself with my family and had varying experiences. So I'm very passionate about our own clients having a fantastic holiday in their villas. So we have really high standards and like to work with owners to make sure that everything runs as smoothly as it can. We set up the management side of the rentals on demand, really, because lots of our owners live abroad, or some live here and don't want the hassle of being called at midnight on a Saturday doing the patrona to sort out no water or electricity. So we've got really good contacts in Mallorca for dealing with all those problems, or, you know, positive things as well, improvements. And also we have a 24/7 hotline for any client staying here, which we rotate between the teams. Anything late at night or TV related is Ben's domain. Anyway, if you want to need anything, come and talk to us at the end, and I'll pass you over to just one GM, not two, and Javier, who can shed some light on where we're at now with licensing. Thank you.
Hi, good evening everybody. So I am Javier, one of the partners of Illeslex Abogados. We stayed also here in Pollença as Pollença Properties, here in Monsebey, in front of the electric shop, which is
Cuadrado.
Can Cuadrado. Exactly. Thank you. First of all, so I would like to thank you for being here. So also to thank Pollença Properties for having invited us to be here with you. Of course, our English is not so accurate as the English of Ben and Charlie. We apologize for that, but I think that we will get what the aim that we want, that we have in our mind, is try to explain really clearly what happens with the new law since the 1st of August, because it's a law who came into force on the 1st of August of this year. I will try not to speak too rapidly. That will be maybe easier for you to follow me. But anyway, so you will receive, of course, the presentation in the future if you give us the email address. And also, I would like to insist on that point that if you have any queries, any doubts at the end, so we will try to answer you, not only in English, but also we speak also French, Dutch, and German. So maybe there are some people here that they prefer to put the question in French or in Dutch or in German. We will do our best to answer also in these languages. Okay, I will do the first part of the presentation. Afterwards, Guillermo will follow me, and afterwards, the end, I will come back. When we talk about the touristic rentals, we have to stress that we have here in the Balearic the competence. The government has the competence to create regulations about tourists. That is something that the Balearic autonomic government has decided to do that because the Constitution of Spain from 1978 gave the possibility to the Comunidades Autónomas to take this competence. And in the case of the Balearic, so they have decided so to have his own regulation about tourists here in the Balearic Islands, in the 4 islands, and even if in the past we have had the possibility to create another laws, now at that moment, so the last one, which is most important for us, is the law from 2012, Law on Tourism in the Balearic Islands. And in this law, it is regulate what we say the commercialization of tourist stays in residential homes. I want to consider that expression because we don't talk in the Balearic law, we don't talk about holiday rentals. That is not an expression of the Balearic law. We talk about commercialization of tourist estates in residential homes. We will see afterwards that when we talk about the state of what we say the urban state law, that is a law from the state in Madrid, there we talk about rentals and what we say seasonal contracts. That is maybe an expression that you have already heard in the past. And in that case, so specifically, so the law say rentals, holiday rentals, and seasonal rentals. But in the Balearic law, when I say, in order to be too brief, we say Balearic law, I say the touristic law of the Balearic Islands. So we don't talk about holiday rentals. We talk about, I insist on that point, tourist stays in residential homes. And the typology of the law of 2012 was, and in that case, was single-family homes, semi-detached single-family homes, and single-family homes between party walls on the same plot of land. That was the sort of properties, the sort of assets which were covered by the touristic law from 2012. After some period of time, at the end of July of this year, so the Parliament has approved a new law, that is the law from the 31st of July 2017, which modified the law of 2012. And the big change really is this law tried to include in the typology of the properties where you can do the activity of tourist estates in residential homes. The big surprise, the big difference, the big change is that we include what we say the multifamily residential homes, which were not covered by the law of 2012. And so the new change is this one. So since the 1st of August, we will see that there will be a moratorium, and we will explain what does it mean. But since the 1st of August 2017, when the new law came into force, so there is the possibility for multifamily residential homes to make what we say tourist estates in that sort of houses. It's afterwards. At the beginning of August, a law decree has also approved to change some two specific articles. But at the end, so what we can say directly is, since the 1st of August 2017, the regulation of the tourist estates has changed here in the Balearic Islands. When we consider that phenomenon of what we say touristic states, we have also to consider another frameworks which are also connected with that phenomenon. And in that case, I say only as a reference, we have to consider the European Union, the European Framework, Article 50, and the Directive of Services of 2006. We have also to consider the Constitution of Spain. We have also to consider the State Urban Rental Law, that is the law from the State of Madrid, from 1994. Also the State Law for Unfair Competition. And afterwards, 3 laws from 2009 and 2013 concerning protection on economic islands. These laws has links connected with the law from the autonomous government here in the Balearic Islands. When we have to try to explain how is the regulation about tourist estates here in the Balearic Islands, the problem is that we don't find any legal definition of that sort of contract. There is no definition in the law. You look for that, you will not find it. But what we find is the definition of the subjects of the tourist activity. And in that case, you have the explanation, the definition, more correctly. So we talk about entities commercializing tourist estates and residential homes, owned by individual persons or legal entities for short duration periods in terms of immediate use and for lucrative purposes. There are two things that we have to consider in that definition of the subjects who can make this activity. There is no application of the principle of exploitation unity. That means that sometimes it's the owner who can make the activity, sometimes it's a company, a limited company, capital company, who can make also the activity. And they can vote to make the activity in different periods during the year. Sometimes you can decide, as an owner, I will make tourist stays during the month of July, but in the month of August, I will give my property to a company, and the company will make the exploitation of that activity during the month of August and September. So there is the principle of exploitation unity is not applicable in that case. And afterwards, there is another principle which is not applicable, is the principle of exclusive use. What does it mean that? That, in fact, for the law, we have an owner who wants to make tourist stays in his home, but at the same time, he wants also to use by himself this property. So that is the conception of the alternation, we say. So you can make, of course, tourist stays during the year, but theoretically, you have to reserve, you have to book your own property for yourself or for your friends. That is, but at the end, that is a little bit theory, because in the practice, there is no control. If you rent the property, I say, if you commercialize the touristic stays, sometimes I used to rent to be faster. But I say, if you rent the property during the whole year, there is nobody who is going to attack you, who is going to claim you, who is going to say to you, oh, you don't respect the principle of the exclusive use, because in fact, in that sort of economic activity, there is not that. This principle is not applicable. So theoretically, you will have the possibility, you will have the possibility to use the property for yourself during the period of time of the year that you want. That is the idea, but in the practice I say there is no control. So in fact, you can rent your property 365 days per year with no control and with no limit. What is also important when we talk about that activity is that we have here in the Balearic law, there is a document to begin the activity. To begin the activity, it's necessary to apply for a license, but it's not the normal license that you have, maybe that you have in your mind. We have to fulfill a paper which is called DRIAD in Mallorquin, or in Spanish. And DRIAD is a declaration where you say that your house fulfills all the requirements needed or required by the law, and you decide to begin the activity. That is the DRIAD. And the DRIAD has a special consequence. If you make the DRIAD, if you present that declaration in front of the government, you can begin the activity immediately. You don't have to wait until to obtain the license. And that is a consequence of the European regulation of the directive that we have seen before 2006. We say, as responsible human beings, that we cover all the requirements that from the law, and we decide to begin the activity. Afterwards, there will be an inspection. One day, you will receive a call, and someone is going to take an appointment with you at home in order to check if the requirements of the law exist in the reality. But this appointment can be taken maybe 2 or 3 or 4 years later. So you have been doing the activity maybe during 4 years with no inspection, and afterwards comes the inspection. Why so late? Because there are 15 inspectors, and in the last years, of course, there has been a lot of applicants for that DRIAD. So that is very important. Since the moment that you apply for a license, you can begin the activity. And in contrast with the new law, the law which is applicable since the 1st of August, the situation is completely different. With the new law, there is a moratorium, we say, a moratoria in Spanish, and that means that you cannot apply for any license at that moment. It's forbidden. Even if you go to the tourist office and you say, I want to apply, that's the papers, they are going to refuse your application, because that is forbidden for the law until the government, until the Conseil Insular decides what we say the zonification. So until the Conseil decides in which areas of Mallorca it is possible to do this activity. So really, I insist on that point. With the new law, the multifamily houses can apply for a license, theoretically, but in fact, due to the moratorium, it's not possible to do that at the moment, because we have to wait until the summer of next year, At that moment, so we will have the possibility to apply for a DRIAD if, of course, our house is located in an area where the Conseil Insular has decided that you can do this activity. Okay, which are really, I put here, so at the top, you see, explanatory statement. So, what sort of activities are not covered by the touristic law? I say here, so I put here, Give economy and sharing economy. I mean, when you invite some friends to your house, that is give economy, and you don't receive any rental because you has invited your friends. This sort of phenomenon which exists a lot because you have a property here, but you have friends maybe abroad, and they will come here for a week. Family, friends, I talk about all sorts of relationships. Huh? If you invite someone without not receiving any money for the rent, for the use of the house, that phenomenon exists, but that phenomenon is not covered by the touristic law. That is gift economy. So you can do what you want without any license, without any driat. That is completely free. Huh? And if you make an exchange of your property with another one who has a property in New York, during the time that you fly to New York, they come here and they stay 1 month in Pollença and you stay 1 month in the 5th Avenue in New York. That sort of phenomenon is not also covered by the law. So it's completely free, this activity. It's not necessary to ask any license, any driat, no requirements to do this activity. That is what we say sharing economy. Okay? Maybe someone will say, Javier, sometimes there is no price here, but there is a price paid abroad. And in that case, what happens? So in fact, what happens is, of course, that will be much more difficult to prove that the payment has been done abroad. But in that case, if you invite your friends in Denmark to come to Pollença, and they pay you in Denmark, in Copenhagen, in that case, for that property, for that activity, you need a license, you need a driat. Another thing is to prove, the inspector has to prove that I have received money in Spain. You have never received any money in Spain because your account is in Denmark and you have received the money in Denmark. But that is a question of proof. But theoretically, if you insist, if you rent your property to someone else and you receive a rental for that activity, even if you receive that in Hong Kong, where it's impossible that the touristic authorities look for that account in Hong Kong. It's completely impossible. Huh? They will never know that you have an account in Hong Kong. But in fact, the activity is covered by the touristic law. And in that case, you need a license. And if you have, of course, afterwards a claim from a neighbor, maybe there will be a procedure against you because it seems that you have receive money for that activity, even if they cannot prove that you have received the money here in the Santander. Okay, that is clear. Huh? Which are really the conditions which are required really to make this activity. And here we say there are 3 conditions. First of all, we say that they are commercialized, the tourist estate are commercialized by tourist companies. And in that case, doesn't matter if we talk about individual persons or legal entities, limited company, for example, or the owner itself. So there is a choice. The owner can decide to make the activity, but the owner can also decide to give that property to someone else to make the activity. But at the end, so we have what we say a business organization. We do the activity often. It's not once a week per year. So we rent the property often. We have to have the possibility to offer services. What we say touristic services. The touristic services really are, in the law it say that the cleaning, the change of the blanket soap, and afterwards what we say the telephone contact during the 24 hours. That is something that sometimes happens, sometimes doesn't happen. It depends on the client. And it depends also on the duration of the contract. For a contract for 1 week, maybe there will be no cleaning during the contract. There will be, of course, a cleaning after the contract, when the people has removed and they give you back the keys. But with a contract of 1 month, maybe that will be reasonable that maybe the tenants, the tourists, will ask you, please, can you send someone to clean? And in that case, you have to be in a position to make this service, to give this service, to offer this service. So we talk about touristic services, but sometimes there are no touristic services because the tourist has refused these services. But you, as an owner or as a company, you have to be in a position to offer these services. There is subjection to VAT in that sort of activity. But only if tourist services are provided. Tourist services has to be offered, I have said 1 minute ago. Tourist services has to be offered. But at the end, that is the decision, the final decision of the client, of the tourist, to have these services. If the services are effectively provided, in that case, there is VAT. And we say here, terraces, swimming pools, home garden maintenance, and cleaning are not touristic services. We have here a prescription for claim, 3 years. It's not a usual thing. If someone comes to your house and he doesn't pay at the end the complete price that you have agreed with him, you will have an action for 3 years after to claim the amount which has not been paid. Secondly, we say that homes that are marketed as through tourist marketing channels. That is very important. So the houses has to be commercialized through what we say tourist channels. And in that case, the new law has a definition of what consider touristic channels. Tourist channels. You can read it. And afterwards, it is said by way of example, it's not a closed list which offer the law. We say as an example, tourist booking channels are travel agencies, reservation centers, companies, and I will insist on real estate agencies. Real estate agencies can be considered as a touristic channel. Why? Or when? When the estate agent offer tourist stays are considered for the touristic law as a touristic channel. Of course, it is possible for the estate agent to do another activities, to offer another services, of course. But when you offer touristic stays in residential homes, the estate agent is considered for the touristic law as a touristic channel. But afterwards we will talk about seasonal contract in the urban law from the state. And seasonal contracts, of course, are completely legal. They exist in the urban law from the state in Madrid. And of course, that activity can be done, of course, through an estate agent. So the same estate agent can offer touristic stays through the Balearic touristic law. And the same estate agent can offer seasonal contracts through the Spanish state, from the state, central state, from the urban law. Are completely compatible, both activities. But of course, when the state agent offers touristic stays in residential homes, in that case, the state agent is considered by the law as a touristic channel. And finally, the third condition is what we say here, the concept that I have just talked about that question. So, we provide tourist accommodation which alternates between the housing private use and residential use. Theoretically, you offer your house to a tourist during some periods, during some months in the year. And the rest of the period of the year, theoretically, you use for yourself. That is the idea that state in the law. But I say, there is no sanction, there is no fines if you rent the property the whole year for touristic stays. But the idea at the beginning, when the government has approved the first law, the idea was we have owners they have residential homes. So from the urbanistic point of view, for the urbanistic law, the use of the house is residential, is not tourist. When you have bought the property in front of the notary the notary has said to you in the purchase public deed, the use of the ground in which the building has created, has built, the use from the urbanistic point of view was residential use, was not touristic use. And I want also to clarify one point in that moment. So, we say here in Spanish also, we talk about touristic apartments. That is an expression that maybe you have heard. Touristic apartments. Touristic apartments is a sort of what we say, touristic apartment really technically, when we say, I have a touristic apartment, that means that you have bought an apartment which can be rented to tourists the whole year, because from the urbanistic point of view, the use of the ground was touristic. And in that case, you don't need any license to make touristic estates, because in that case there is not the combination of residential use and touristic estates. That is the whole year as a hotel, is considered as a hotel. So you have, what we say, so a touristic apartment. We don't talk tonight about touristic apartments. We talk always about, for example, apartments, residential, private, multi-residential private homes with a residential use, but theoretically, of course, they can be used for a tourist with a license that you have to provide and to ask. Okay? The difference is very important to distinguish one phenomenon from the other one. Along with typologies, before the new law, yes, there was a discussion because always the multi-houses, residence, multi-family houses were excluded from the touristic law of 2012. Now, with the new law for 2017, these sort of houses are included. And as you see, at the end, independent homes in multi-family buildings and townhouses under the law of what we say proprietà orizzontale. That is the big change of the new law in relation with the old one. But the problem is that with the new law, we cannot apply directly on the 2nd of August, we cannot apply for a license for that sort of houses. We have to wait. But at the end, we have to wait for all the typologies, as we will see later. Finally, because now Guillermo will follow me, so there is a presumption, juris tantum on the subject of accommodation contract in the article of the law. What does it mean? That the law says that, the touristic law says that, normally if you rent a property for a short time, with a payment, with a rental, we consider, the government considers that these sort of rentals are touristic estates, because the finality of the contract is touristic. Of course, we have the possibility to demonstrate in front of the government that we don't make touristic estates. But in that case, the finality of the contract has to be different. Cannot be touristic, has to be different. And different, if you think about what sort of finality can be different to the touristic finality. At the end, so we think about professional, labor reasons, professional reasons, or maybe also health reasons. If you rent your property to someone who wants to take care of a family who is in the hospital, in that case, he comes to Mallorca. He will be in an apartment, or in a detached house, or in a villa, but the reason is not touristic. The reason is to accompany the family who is in the hospital. And if you come here for a week to work in a restaurant in Pollença, you can, of course, rent the property, but this contract will not cover it by the touristic law, because the reason is not touristic, it's labor reason. You come here for a week to work in that kitchen from that restaurant. You follow me? But of course, we know that the majority of people who comes here to Mallorca, they come for touristic reasons. And in that case, if they are considered tourists, and you know perfectly what is a tourist, even it's, by the point by the theoretical point of view, it's not so easy really to find a definition of what is a tourist. But we know, we have in our mind very clearly what is a tourist. So if you rent your house, if you want to rent your house, your apartment, your detached house or your villa to a tourist, here in Mallorca, in the Balearic Islands, you need a license. And that sort of activity will be covered by the touristic law. And I will finish. If you have had a villa in Melilla, in the south, in Melilla there is no touristic law. And in that case, you will not need any license to rent your property in Melilla. But here, the government has taken the responsibility to create his own touristic law. That is why when you make a touristic activity, when you rent your property to a tourist, you need a license. But I insist on that point. In Melilla, you will not need any license. But of course, I can assure you that in Melilla, if you have a villa, you will have not so many people who will come to you for 1 week in the summer. Thank you.
Good evening. Good evening. First of all, I want to thank Ben, Pepe, and Charlie for inviting us again to give this talk to you. I was wondering now if we are very brave because we try to explain you in your own language the domestic rentals, or you are really brave to sit here in front of us trying to understand the Spanish or the Mallorcan domestic rentals. Okay? Well, anyway, we do our best. Okay? Javier was trying to explain you the new law, no? The novelty of the new law. There is a touristic law approved in the year 2012, and last summer was approved a novelty of this law, and the novelty now is that it's going to be possible in the future to rent touristical purposes in multi-family houses would be possible, okay? It would be possible to rent apartments, to rent flats also, okay? But there are some conditions. There are some conditions in the new law, and there are especially two conditions that has to be fulfilled by all the owners. Okay? ¿Está conectado?
No, ya lo escuché.
¿Ahora? ¿No? Sí, sí. Can you hear? It's okay? It's fine? Well, as I was telling you, there are two new conditions in the new law. No? The first one of them is zoning. What does it mean? It means that now, by law, the Council of Mallorca has a time limit of 12 months to decide in which areas of Mallorca would be possible to rent the properties in a touristical way. Okay? Well, the Council of Mallorca in Mallorca, but the Council of Menorca in Menorca, and the Council of Ibiza and Formentera for Ibiza and Formentera. Okay? We are in Mallorca and we talk all the time about the Council of Mallorca. Huh? Because, as I suppose you know, there is a council for each of the islands. There is a government of the Balearic Islands, and there is a government or a council of each island in Mallorca, in the Balearic Islands. So, first of all, the Council of Mallorca will decide in which part, in which area, in which zones of the island of Mallorca would be possible to rent the property. Okay? And the second condition would be that the owners' community, because we are talking that right now the novelty is that in multi-family houses it will be possible to rent a house, to rent apartments on the flats. In these cases, the owners' community has to make a settlement, has to approve, has to make an authorization to allow these owners to rent the property. Okay? But coming back to the first of the conditions, that's all. What does it mean? It means that, as I have told you, that the Council of Mallorca will decide in a time limit of 12 months in which parts of the island will be possible. In the case of Palma, I think you live in Pollença and probably you think about Pollença only, but in the case of Palma, Palma is the capital of the island. In this case, the town hall of Palma will decide in which areas of Palma would be possible to rent the property. But in the rest of the island, the Council of Mallorca will decide. I have told you the maximum term is 12 months. It means until the 1st of August of the next year. It has to be decided before. And as Javier has already explained you, right now there is a moratorium. It means it is not possible right now to apply, to submit an application at RIA. I mean, it's talking all the time about the RIA. It is not possible right now to submit an application at RIA to obtain a license during this time, this 12 months. Would not be possible. Okay? The Council of Mallorca will decide in which areas it's going to be possible, but which is the role of the councils, of the town, in this case of Pollença, for example. Well, after that the council has decided in which part of the island, in which areas is possible to rent the property, the council will have 1 month's time to issue a report. Okay? This report cannot contain more, cannot enlarge this area, but can make more restrictions. I mean, the council will be able to decide if it is a suitable area or not. They can decide if this area can be rented total or partial. In one part of this area, yes, in another part, no. They also can decide about the building types. If it is possible that one family houses are able to rent the property, but multi-family houses, no? Each council will be able to decide about these things, okay? Very important. And also, there is another typology, that is to rent the primary residence. In the future, it will be possible also not to rent a second residence, but to rent your primary residence. But it has to be developed by a new regulation. It is not regulated, not yet. To be possible.
One question. And can you lose your permanent residence for tax reason? For example, if you want to have a bonus in declaración de la renta, you need to prove that it's your permanent home. You have a mortgage, and for example, with the new law, if you rent, you don't lose the right.
No, you don't lose the right. Well, an important point is also to say that now with the Brexit, I mean, all this law applies for everybody, belonging to the European community, European Union or not. The only difference is that when you in the future are outside the European Union, the tax rate, if you declare your incomes, your rentals in Spain, the tax rate is going to be 24% and now it's 19%. And you cannot deduct so many costs as now as European citizens, but there is no other difference right now. Okay, just to be clear about this point. No? Well, we have explained that the council will decide the areas, and the Council of Mallorca and the town hall, Pollença, will decide about type of building, about the extension of this area, and some other restrictions maybe can be restricted. Okay, but this proceeding or this procedure can be changed each time, at any time, but by the same procedure. It means that if the Council of Mallorca and the town halls want to change it, will be possible in the future, but they need to start again the procedure. It's not so easy. It's not going to be so easy for them. Also, they could impose, both by law and by territorial, urban or environmental regulatory instruments, new specific town planning conditions for the exercise of this activity. It can be restricted in the future also. But now we are speculating about the future. And it is also clear that homes which already legally exercise their activity at the time of the entry in force of this law will not be affected by the zoning. It means that all of you, if you have a license, according to the old regulation, it is valid, there is no problem, you are not affected by the new area, by the zoning, okay? You are excluded from that. For this license, apply the old regulation. What about the available places? No? The plans of the programs of the Council of Mallorca will establish also by each island and areas the maximum number of sleeping places for each person, likely to be commercialized as touristic residential accommodation. In Mallorca, just for your information, it's estimated that there are more than 40,000 sleeping places available, would be to share among all the towns and areas. And right now, in the draft of the project by the Council of Mallorca, they have divided Mallorca in 6 areas. And these areas are the rustic land, coast areas, and the urban interior areas. And they divide also more. And they say there are common rustic land, protected rural land, saturated coastal areas, non-saturated coastal areas. Saturated coastal areas right now is Calvia, all the beaches in Calvia, Cala Millor, and also the Playa de Palma, El Arenal and the Playa de Palma are considered right now in the draft of the Council of Mallorca as saturated areas. And then there are non-saturated urban interior areas of the village of Mallorca, of the interior of Mallorca, and the saturated urban interior areas also. It is a presumption, it's not decided, but it's in the draft of the Council, that the zone qualifies as urban core of non-saturated interior zones are the designated areas suitable for vacation rentals, both for single family and also for multi-family homes. Does it mean that in saturated areas won't be possible to obtain a license? No. In all these areas will be left without places. No of these 6 areas will be left without places. But there will be areas with a limited number of them. And it is supposed that in these non-saturated areas will be more places. Okay? But it's not decided, it's just a draft of this project. And which one would be the conditions to buy an available places? Because you will have to buy the places to pay a fee for that. First of all, the price will be developed through the regulation. It's not decided, not yet. The regulation will fix it, okay, but not yet. There will be a difference in the price between places corresponding to residential dwelling suited to touristic estate marketing, may be different from the corresponding touristic accommodation, the usual touristic accommodation in hotels. There will be a difference in the price of these places when we buy it. There will be also a differentiation between the places or estates, permanent transmission, and the places and estates in interim transmissions. Okay? And there will be also a different and lower price established for the places and estates in the main residence rentals modality. It's not developed by law, but when it will be developed in the future by a new regulation, probably the price, the fee will be lower also in these cases. And for the places and estates corresponding to residential housing will be with a higher and progressive price if you have more than one property. By law, there is a limit of 3 properties. The same owner or company would be able to explode, to rent 3 properties as maximum. And in these cases, you will have to pay a higher price, for a higher fee for these places. Which are the limitations and the prohibitions by law? Well, it won't be possible to rent in protected rural land. Won't be possible in the future. It was possible with the old regulation, but it won't be possible in the future. Also, in this state, subsidized or price-controlled houses won't be possible. And also in houses with serious or very serious infringement in urban matters won't be possible. When there is a final fine, final penalty, and it cannot be possible to record, to appeal this decision, in these cases, these houses won't be possible to apply for a license in the future. It wasn't the case in the past, but now won't be possible in the future. It's another limitation. I have already explained that the number of properties will be maximum of 3 properties for each owner or company. And this regulation does not apply to room rentals, but room rentals will be developed in the future by a new regulation, as I have already explained. And which are the requirements and conditions to apply for the license in the future? As Javier has already explained you, there is a moratorium of 12 months now. Okay? But when it will be possible in the future, there are some requirements and conditions that your application has to fulfill, or the property has to fulfill. First of all, a current certificate of ability. This document wasn't so important in the past, but in the future will be very important. This document is issued by the Council of Mallorca and will determine and will fix the maximum number of places you are able to rent. It wasn't the case in the past. In the past, you could have, if anybody of you has a license for a house with 10 rooms, with a double room, you can rent 20 places. If the current certificate of ability had a maximum of 10 places, in this case, they could rent the 20 places. In the future, it won't be possible. The maximum, the limit of the rental would be the number, the figure of the current certificate of ability. Second, you have to comply rules of sustainability and accessibility applied to dwellings. Third, you need, as before also, an energy performance certification with the level F or D, but you have a time limit of 1 year to adapt your property to this level. Fourth, you need an individual water meter and also individual meters for electricity or for gas. It can be substituted in the future for a counter. If it is not possible to obtain a meter, an individual meter, you can substitute it maybe for a counter where you can count and read always the consumption of water, electricity, or gas. And you need also an insurance. You need an insurance for your cyber liability in front of the tourists who are going to visit you and to stay in your flats or apartments, and also in front of the community of owners if you rent a property, an apartment or flat in a building, in a more family building. What else? There is not possible to put an extra bed in the future for children under 12 years. Will be forbidden by law. Any kind of advertising must incorporate the tourist accommodation registration number. You get a number when you apply for a license, and you obtain a license, you get a number, a code. You need to advertise always with this number. You have to put it in your publicity, in your advertising. Okay? And without the presented application, TRIA, terms such holiday, touristic, or similar cannot be used when you commercialize accommodation. Okay? When you put an advertising, you need to have a license to use these kind of terms, like touristic, holidays, and similar. Javier has already explained it, but you need also to offer or to warranty to the tourists that you can provide them directly or indirectly touristic services, like cleaning, changing of the blanket. But you don't need to provide them with this service, but you need to warranty that you can provide them with these services if they ask for them, that you are able to provide them with that. Okay? Another novelty is that the age of the buildings. It will be possible only to apply for a touristic rental, touristic license, if the building is older than 5 years. The houses built in the last 5 years won't have the possibility to apply for a license. Okay? That's to avoid the speculation. It would be necessary also to have the telephonic assistance 24 hours. You need to be able to offer this service, also this touristic service also. but not only available for the tourists, but also for the community of owners. If something happens in the community, I mean, you need to be, it has to be possible for the community of owners to contact you to explain you this problem also. And you will have also in the future to inform in writing of the community rules and regulations to the tourists. You have to inform them in a written way, and you have to explain them to be able to show them also to touristic registration housing number. The owner will have to provide also the ownership title at any time, identification, personal identity card or passport, and proof of the payment of the taxes by the tourist ministry. Has to be able to show to the tourists all these kind of papers. The maximum length of a tourist stay would be 1 month, no longer. It's forbidden by law. This is the maximum. Okay? 4 weeks, 30 days, 1 month. And also, as the tourists in the hotels they have the obligation to inform to the police, and you will have to communicate the data related to all the tourists, the stays, to the General Directorate of the police also. So we have to keep informed. And in the future, the regulation we develop this now may establish additional requirements, conditions, and limits and contents. Right now, this one are a lot of requirements and a lot of restrictions and limits, but can be increased in the future also by the public administration. Okay? And there are special requirements for multi-family homes. We have already told you that is one of the novelties of the law. It will be possible in the future to rent in multi-family homes. It wasn't possible in the past with the old regulation. But they ask for a special requirement. This one is that it is essential that the community status do not forbid the holiday rental. Usually the status of the community of owners never talk about this, because in the past it wasn't very usual to rent touristic rentals in many family houses. It wasn't. So usually the statutes don't provide this. And in this case, it will be necessary a favorable settlement or agreement of the community owners allowing this owner to rent the property. And this majority has to be a double majority. It has to be a majority of the owner, which at the same time represent the majority of the quotes of the community, the percentage of the community, to allow this owner to commercialize his apartment or flat. In a second call, in this meeting of the owners, in the first call, there is not the majority of the owners. In the second call is not the majority of the owners present in this meeting, but they have to represent at the same time the majority of the percentage of the community, the quotes of the community. Okay? The owners obtain an agreement, a settlement of the community of owners. They have to inscribe also this agreement in the land registry. It is an obligation also by law for these owners who desire to rent their property. And I think another requirement is the temporality. When in multi-family houses you apply for a license in the future, you get a license, but this license will be only for 5 years. Every 5 years has to be extended. This license is extendable for another periods of 5 years, but to extend another 5 years, the conditions are again the same. Means you need to continue fulfilling all legal or regulatory requirements, including being a suitable area. You need the agreement of the community of owners. You need a communication of the owner by the owner, or with express permission of the owner. And you will need also in the future a certificate of the touristic places manager, certifying that the owner has temporarily the availability of the stays for 5 years more. If you fulfill all these requirements, will it be possible to extend your license for 5 years more? Thank you. Now my colleague Javier is going to go first.
Questions. Now we have a new typology that we said that is completely new from the new law, which is called rent of primary residence. And the key points of that sort of typology is the following. We talk about only natural persons, not legal entities, not limited companies, only physical persons, natural persons. They are owners of this property, and we don't distinguish if we talk about single family or a multi-family. Doesn't matter. The only thing that is with multi-family, we will need the approval of the community. With a villa, we will not need this approval of the community. We talk about main residence. So the person who can apply for that sort of activity has to develop the activity in the main residence. Main residence, that is a concept that is not defined so in the law. So we have to think about normally what we say the certificate of registration of the town hall. If you are registering in the town hall where you live, that will be your main residence. And I assume that if you want to make this activity, that means thinking about people who are not resident here in Spain. They have to be resident. Because if you have your main residence in Spain, it means that you are a tax resident. You stay much more than 183 days in Spain. So that is the idea. So I don't see this sort of activity with someone who are living really in Germany or in England and they have a second residence here in Spain. Even if they are registered in Pollença, sometimes they do that, even if they are not considered legal resident because they don't have the residence card. They have the NI number, but not the residence card. So I assume that the person who can do this activity is someone, doesn't matter the nationality, someone who is tax resident in Spain. And that means that he has the residence card. Right? And of course, he's registered in the town hall. 60 days, maximum period of this activity, 60 days, no more. And we say in the law, prefix it. So we have to decide in which months you want to do this activity. The area where the house is located has to be suitable. So the zonification and the approval in the case of the multi-family houses are always requirements that we put on the table. We cannot do this activity if the area where you have the property is not a good area for the council. And here we talk about 5 years, always. 5 years, extendable for 5 years. And the most important thing, the most amazing question in that sort of typology is that you can stay with the tourist at your home. That's the question. Because in the touristic stays that we have talked about in the last hour or so, that is something that you have to know. You receive the tourist, you give the key, and you go out. I don't know where you go, but you have to go out. You cannot be with the tourist in the house. In that sort of activity, of modality, of typology, you can stay at home with the tourist. The final idea of that sort of typology is that you need money to pay the mortgage. And the government wants to give you more possibilities to pay the mortgage. And how? They give you the possibility to receive tourists at home with yourself at your home, because you cannot go out. And that is the idea. Sanctions. The sanctions, if you don't respect the requirements of the law say that there will be fines from 4,000 euros until 40,000 euros. But specifically, that is something that they have stressed a lot in the newspapers when they were discussing so the law is the fines will be higher in relation with the past. The fines will be from 20,000 euros until 40,000 euros if you make tourist stays without license, without DRIAD. If you receive tourists at your home and you have no license, you can be fined with a fine of 20 until 40,000 euros. And if you consider this amount, surely you will see, you will arrive to the conclusion that is no more interesting to do this activity illegally. Legally, of course, but illegally, what you win, you lose with fine. Really, at the end, so it's a little bit silly to do this activity with this sort of amounts. With 4,000 euros, that was something always interesting. 4,000, I win 20,000, I pay 4,000. In the worst case, of course, in the worst case. There is also another sort of accessory sanctions, but I will not talk about that. There is the possibility to close for the commercial entity. So that is why we say here there is a presumption juris tantum of your responsibility, but at the end you can avoid the responsibility if you demonstrate, you show that in the contract was foreseen that the owner has no responsibility because that was the entity who has to apply for a license. Concerning the publicity, we say that there is also responsible concerning so the advertising media and the person who inserts the advertisement. And afterwards, there are a lot of facilities now with the new law to denounce the neighbors or denounce citizens who are making holiday rentals or touristic stays, more specifically, without license. Which are the scenarios that we have at that moment? That is very clear, that I hope that it will be very clear for you as a conclusion, really, nearly conclusion of our speech. First of all, homes with submitted DRIAD and or tourist registration number before the 1st of August. So, really, the houses who had the license, or they have applied for a license before the 1st of August. They retain all the rights. They can continue to operate without absolute normality. So they don't have to pay any amount for the places. That is very important. There will be no payment for, I have a house for 4 places, I have to pay so much money to apply for a license. No. With the old system, there is no payment. And, of course, you will have the license for the whole of your life if you make the activity. The law says that if you are more than 3 years stop it, the activity, you have stopped the activity for more than 3 years, you lose the license. It is not so easy also for the administration to show that you have not made any holiday rentals during 3 years continually. It's not so easy. The only point that you have to consider for the all license is that you will need to communicate to the police, the tourist who comes to you. That is something from the new law that is applicable for the people who has received a license in the past. And they continue making so holiday rentals. Scenario 2, or second, isolated or detached homes not registered in tourists before the 1st of August. And pay attention, for they could have been registered. They could have been registered, but they have not applied before the 1st of August for a license. They have not made the DRIAD. What happens with this sort of activity, with that sort of houses? For example, a villa here in Pollença. What happened? So they will have to be located in zones approved by the council. So the new law is completely applicable. They have to ask to wait. They must meet the conditions and requirements, and they have to be older than 5 years old. So the new villa from last year cannot apply with the new law. With the old law was possible. With the new law is not possible. That is why in the last 4 months before August there was crowded people, a lot of people who has applied for it because they knew that the new law will be much more restrictive in relation with the old one. That is why there are a lot of people, even if they didn't thought really, they didn't think at the beginning so to make holiday rentals, they have decided so to increase the value of the property in the future, thinking that we will sell the property. It is much more value, of course, the property if you have applied for a DRIAD before the 1st of August. Because you don't take any risk about or with the tonification. And finally, residential homes and apartments in multifamily buildings that wish to commercialize tourist stays from the 1st of August. In that scenario are all the apartments. The apartments in what we say in multifamily buildings were forbidden to apply the license before the 1st of August, as I said at the beginning. It was forbidden, it was not possible. Now it will be possible. What happens with that sort of property? So they depend on the zoning and the quotas. They have to pay to the tourists in the future to take the license. They must fulfill all the conditions, technical and quality requirements, and of course, older than 5 years old. Here there are a lot of people who were illegal in the past and now wants to try to be legal, but they have to wait until the zonification. And in the case of the apartment, they have to wait until the approval of the community of the building. Two conditions: approval of the community, and also the zonification has to be positive. The house has to be located in a place where the council decide that you can do this activity. Finally, I say that that's my promise, 2 minutes. Until now, we have talked about the new law. The new law is the law of the touristic, of the Balearic government, the touristic law. That is clear. All the things that we have told until now are connected with the touristic law from the Balearic government. But we have also the seasonal rental contract in the rental urban law. And that is a contract that we have used in the past, sometimes in order to make the activity, in order to make the touristic activity in an apartment, because the apartment was a typology of a property which would not be possible for that sort of property for that sort of typology to ask a license. And we have, the lawyers also in the past, we have sometimes advised to our clients, you write a seasonal contract. Even if you know that you receive a tourist, in that period was the discussion maybe that could be a good way in order to avoid the fines of the touristic law. And the seasonal contract still exists. There is no change about that law. We have always that law. But we will see that the application in practice with the new law, with the new touristic law, the application of that urban law has been much more reduced. And we will see why now. In 2013, we have to say, 2013, the seasonal rental urban law has been changed. And they have put in this clause that you see here. The temporary transfer of the use of the totality of furniture and equipped home in terms of minute use, marketed or promoted through touristic channels, it's the same sound that we have heard before, and made for lucrative purpose, of course you receive money, when subjected to a specific regime deriving from its sectoral regulation. So these sort of contracts are not covered anymore by the urban law if there is a specific regime derived from its sectoral regulation. And that is what we have here in the Balearic Islands, very clear, since 2012, and now much more clear with the law of 2017. That is why I say, if we had a villa in Melilla, we could apply for a touristic activity. We could make touristic rentals because in Melilla there is no specific regulation for tourists. That is, and in that case, in Melilla, they apply the urban law. And the urban law say that it is possible to make the activity without license. But if there is a specific regulation in the Balearic Islands, in that case, the urban law is not applicable to this sort of contracts. So, really, we have always the urban rental law, of course. We have the seasonal rental contract, of course. But which is the framework of regulation of that sort of activity? So we have to consider the urban law and also the contract that we have to write. There is one problem with this sort of these contracts, is what we say, so the deposit. Because here it is said that it's compulsory to ask a deposit of 2 months. 2 months. But of course, if you make a contract for 1 week and you receive 100 euros per day, that means so 600, 700 euros per week. But you need a deposit of 2 months. At the end, so you have to ask 6,000 euros. It's completely crazy. Because you pay maybe 1,000 euros for 1 week for an apartment, but you have to make a deposit for 6,000 euros. So you see, it's not so reasonable. So that is why the draft law for housing from the autonomic government now provides that the deposit in seasonal loan rental exceeding 1 month is not applicable the deposit. So in the future, if you make a contract less than 1 month, it will be not necessary to ask a deposit to the tenant. Which are the consequences if we talk about a seasonal contract? We say that that is a seasonal contract. We sign a seasonal contract. Which are the consequences of that sort of contract? The prescription for claiming the rental which have not been paid, 5 years. There is the responsibility by accident. So if the tenant has an accident, you as owner has no responsibility. There is no necessity to, of course, to put on the table an insurance. As before, so Guillermo has talked about touristic law, where it is necessary to have an insurance. We don't talk about a tourist. We talk about a private person, a tenant. So here. The touristic marketing channels are banned, are forbidden. We cannot use, for seasonal contract, the touristic channels. There are no services. There is no VAT. If the person doesn't want to go out when the contract has finished, you have to go to the court. You cannot call to the police to say, please, ask these people, these guys, to go out. You have to go to INCA, and that means a lot of months before you obtain your ideas to go out. We cannot use the terms tourist, vacation, or similar. And at the end, so normally these seasonal contracts are for contracts more than 1 month, because we have the presumption of the law, which is saying that contracts under 1 month are considered theoretically are contracts submitted to touristic law. But in fact, it is possible to have a seasonal contract for less than a month. Of course, it is possible theoretically, but the finality of that contract has not to be touristic. That is why we say at the end, as a conclusion, the seasonal contract, which is regulated by the urban estate law, exist, but they apply to rental relations with non-touristic purpose and created through non-touristic channels. And if we think about that paragraph, at the end, we have to conclude that we will use seasonal contract submitted to the urban estate law when the purpose is not touristic, and the purpose is labor, professional, or health. But in the other cases, even if you think, if the person who wants to come to me, he wants to come to Pollença for the festival of classic music, which exists more than 50 years here in Pollença, in Convento de Santo Domingo. He wants to come here to listen to that concerts, and he has bought the tickets, of course. There are 4 or 5 concerts during the month of August. Even that, we have to consider that maybe that is tourist, what we say that cultural tourist. That would be the same if someone decides to come to Pollença to go to eat in the best restaurants here in the area in Pollença. That would be gastronomic tourist. So at the end, you see that nearly all the activities that we can consider are included in the idea of tourist. Everything is nearly tourist, except the questions connected with labor, with salary, with employees, with professional activity, and health. And that is why I say from the beginning that the seasonal contract now is much more restricted. It is possible to make a seasonal contract, of course. But if you receive at home a tourist, it's not more possible to use that sort of dress. You have to go to the touristic law. And in the touristic law, they ask you to apply for a license. But that's the situation. Thank you very much, and we are open. So we have one question.
Time for questions.
Just on the last point, you said that you considered a client coming over here to buy a house for himself that's not tourism, it's for purchase and investment, it's for business as well. Would that be considered tourism?
No, and in that case, I think I have said in that case it's clear that you can you can make a contract with that guy, so a seasonal contract submitted to the urban law. What is important that doesn't matter if you have a tourist or if you have a private person who comes for a professional activity, that is a good advice for us always. You have to write a contract. Verbal contracts are not the best solution. Even if legally, theoretically, a verbal contract is a legal contract. You can make a verbal contract for 1 week with someone, and everything is by month by telephone. But if you have a problem in the future with inspection from the tourist government, so that will be easier for you to defend your position if you have a written contract. So that is why we advise always to write a written contract.
Coming back to your point about communities and
About
the communities,
yes,
and how they will allow you. It's two-vote thing, right? So first it's by individual number, and then it's by percentage of, let's say, if an owner owns 4 apartments in a building, he has more pull than the other guys, right? So it's 2 votes.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, there is one vote. No, there is one vote, but you have to fulfill in that vote these 2 majorities.
Okay.
But there is only one vote. And of course, talking about that question, maybe now in February, normally in March, there are a lot of assemblies of the communities every year. Sometimes it's in the summer, but sometimes it's before the summer. If someone thinks or wishes to make holiday rentals or tourist stays at his own, in that case, at his own apartment, we talk about that in that case always. When we talk about the community, we talk always about multi-family houses, not villas. It's in February, there is the annual meeting. It's in February, for example, or in March. And of course, I say of course, normally the phonification will not get decided in March or in February. You have to wait maybe until June of May. And in that case you say, oh, if we don't ask any authorization in March in the annual meeting of the community, that means that in May comes the phonification. The phonification says that if it's possible for your department to make the activity, but if you don't have the authorization, the approval from the community, you cannot do the activity. And in that case, what happens? You have to wait until February 2019 to ask the approval of the community. And in that case, what we advise is to put on the table that asking in February now. And so you will ask an approval from the community, which always will be applicable only if the Council of Mallorca decides in June that your apartment is located in a positive area to make that activity. You understand me? You follow me? So our advice would be, so if you have an assembly in February, ask the approval. In the agenda of the assembly, you have the possibility, you have to ask to the administrator, please put that point. My name, as an owner of that apartment, I ask to the community an approval to make this activity. But of course, even if you obtain the approval, you cannot. It would be not possible to begin the activity because you need to fulfill the second requirement. The second requirement is the phonification, the zoning of the Council of Mallorca. Otherwise, maybe you will have to wait until February or March of 2019.
In reference to the question before about somebody coming over to buy a property and wanting to rent under the law, urban law, would they have to...
When you rent with urban law?
With the urban law?
Yes.
Would they have to leave a 2-month deposit if they're staying for a week in order to look at properties?
You are asking if it would be necessary to deposit 2 months? No.
To leave a deposit?
No. There is a draft of a new law for Mallorcan law for housing, and they say that if there is under 1 year is proportional to this time. For 1 year is 2 months, under 1 year time is proportional to the time of the contract, okay? And under 1 month, there is no necessary to put the deposit, to do a deposit.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask very quickly, you mentioned the water meters in a multi-family home. If there's not separate water, you could have a water meter would satisfy the new requirements once the zoning and everything else.
No, I think that, yes, the law put that condition, but in fact I think they will be much more flexible, so in order to permit people to cover that requirement. So it would be enough maybe a meter or so. In fact, I think that in the multi-family houses sometimes there is only one contour, and afterwards so everybody pays in function of the percentage of the community. You will have to demonstrate that you have put it a meter specifically for the water that you use at home. The idea is, of course, not to to avoid that the others are going to pay maybe the big consumption of water that your tourists use at your home.
Okay.
Can I ask two questions, if I may, very quickly? First of all, you kind of implied, if I understood it right, that permits are more likely to be available in non-saturated interior areas. Is that a rural area, or would that include small town like Campinas and Bugo, do you think?
When we talk about that, really the government, the Council of Mallorca is thinking about what we say a SPLA. A SPLA. A SPLA is the area that Mallorquin, that's the center of Mallorca. Center of Mallorca is Inca, and afterwards all the village around Inca. You can maybe until Campanet, Sineu, Selva, Caimari, Buja, Sapobla, maybe also. That's the center of Mallorca. What we say, what is known as Esplà de Mallorca. This area is the area where you are going to see that will be much more license given in Mallorca. Because it's the less crowded area, the less crowded, touristic crowded area in Mallorca.
Thank you.
Not saturated.
And also, very quickly, you mentioned a serious property with a serious infringement in an urban area could be a problem. What do you mean by that?
Planning.
That urbanistic infringement. So if you have made, for example, a new garage without license, so you will have a procedure, and if you have a final resolution declaring so that you have not respected the urbanistic law from Pollença, in that case, and there is not possibility to go on appeal, in that case, you will not be able to ask for a license. But if you are still discussing with Pollença or with the Conseil Insular about that resolution, you are still discussing because you go on appeal, in that case, during that period, you will be able to apply for a license.
Thank you for trying to explain the unspeakable.
Thank you.
And I also understand that all my questions, your answers are probably hypothetical. I don't know if this is on.
Yeah.
I also know that when you say the council, you mean the Conseil, not the local.
I know, I say town hall, that is from the...
Just, I've got lots of questions, and unfortunately I have to be home at 10 o'clock, so I don't think I have time. But one of them is, in your experience, when you're going back to the Conseil, and in a hypothetical question that when Pollença, for instance, I think we're all interested in Pollença, are given, say, let's say 1,000 licenses, who and how are these licenses going to be picked out of the hat? Who is going to choose, or who's going to decide who gets the license and who gets a license? Will Mr. Senor Perez get a license easier than Mr. John Smith or Herr Grubel, say, for instance? That's one question out there. The other thing is, you're asking about allow. What is stopping me from renting a property, using allow, and telling the people, look, sign a contract for, say, 30 days or 31 days, I'm only asking for a very small deposit because you and I know that the rent is going to be only going to be €1,000 a month, and I'm really going to charge you €200 a month. And then the people leave after 2 weeks. What is stopping me signing a contract with people that know, and I know they're going to leave after 2 months, 2 weeks? And I continue doing that every month. Who is going to check that I'm not using this trick every 2 weeks? Who is going to find out? Because you know better than me that when you sign a contract, a allow contract, the only people involved are the owners and the people signing the contract. Nobody from the tourist is coming to be involved, so they couldn't care less. And also, the law allows me, or if I have the property allowed, to have 20 people in there. Oh, even if there are only 4 beds. As you know, in Songo Leo, they're all contract allowed, and they're only 2 bedrooms, so you've probably got people hot bedding. Who's going to kick them out? Nobody. And that's two of my questions. Other people want to ask the same ones. Thank you.
Yes. Of course, there is no regulation about how the places are going to be sold. There is no regulation about that question. Who is going to decide that Mr. Perez will get, first of all, the places before than someone else? I think that there is no regulation. We'll have to wait a little bit more. Before June, we will know that. But I assume that the person who is going to obtain a license and he's going to pay for that places will be the person who first asked for that places. So at the end, there will be one date. From that date, you can apply for a license. If you apply, you pay it, because you can do activity from the moment that you apply. And of course, you are a little bit, you are doubting, so you are hesitating about to do or not to do that. That can happen. That maybe when you want to apply, maybe the places are already covered by someone else. So I want to think that there will be no tricks, but that is something that maybe is yes, is not so realistic. But I hope that the regulation will be much more clear, and the person who applies first, that's the person who apply and who pay, will be the person who will receive the license. But I cannot really say any more about it. But it's a risk, of course.
Yeah, many things are not defined, not yet. It's a draft, it's a project. To the second question, you're saying if I do a contract by law, and every 2 weeks I have another client. Well, according to the new regulation, if you have every 2 weeks clients for touristic purposes, because they are visiting Mallorca and they are tourists, you are not fulfilling the law, and that's clear. The other thing, if the public administration, touristic ministry, inspector, they have the possibility, to prove that you are renting in a touristical way, but there is a presumption in the law. They say the owner will have to demonstrate that he's not renting to tourists. That is the key now. It changes now. So you will have, in case you are denounced, an inspector is coming and there's a file against you, you will have to demonstrate that your guests, your clients, are not tourists. Because this presumption is in cases, contracts under 1 month's time are touristic contracts, touristic activity, and the finality, the reason of the visit of this guest it hasn't to be touristic. You have to demonstrate in this case. So you have to have a copy of each contract with each client. In this contract, they have to explain, I'm coming to Mallorca to buy a property and to visit properties. I'm coming to be operated. I'm coming for health reasons. Meaning, you will have to demonstrate that in this case. Okay?
You need a lot of compliant tourists.
Because there is a presumption now by law.
Thank you. I think you said that those people who have a license that was granted before August 2017 weren't subject to the provisions of the new regulations after August.
People who has applied before the 1st of August, even if they don't have in his hands or the license, because they wait, they take a lot of time to release, they are covered by the old one.
And the second part of that question...
Except the question of the communication to the police, the identification of the people who are...
That's the second part of my question. Is that to the local police, and what information do the local police want?
No, that is not to the local police. That will be normally to the Guardia Civil here in Pollença. That's the...
Well, I'm not in Pollença, but I'm in Campanet, so I know...
In Campanet. You will, normally that will be Guardia Civil. That is not regulated. But what with the hotels in Guardia Civil, Policía Local, I don't think so. I'm not sure, but I don't think so. Policía Local receive any information from the hotels, for example. And the same that happens with the hotels is what the law has policy with that sort of residence, private residence. But it's not yet stipulated, not yet developed.
So it's very murky at this point.
Huh?
It's very murky, very confused at this point.
It's a little bit confused, but we have time. We have time enough to clarify that point, because at that moment, the regulation has not been applied, so you don't have to make any communication to anybody.
So do nothing.
Do nothing until.
Thank you.
One moment, you say it is confused, but in that moment where you apply for a license, you want to develop a touristic activity like the hotel, and you need to fulfill the same regulations as the hotels. And the hotel, they have to inform to the police about all the guests in a hotel. You will have to provide the police with the same list of guests, because you have to fulfill the same obligation, because it is a touristic activity. You are an entrepreneur. You know, in the moment when you apply for a license, you want to be an entrepreneur also. You know.
Just in addition to that, does that apply to people who have the license already also? Does it inform to the police? Does it matter if you had the license already, or you're applying for a new?
That's for everybody. Yeah.
Everybody has to do this.
Yes,
In
everybody.
the future, that'd be good. That's the thing I never heard.
Everybody has to do that.
In the future, though.
In the future, in the future. Yes, at the back.
Oh, hello, my name's Brianna, hi. A quick question, my husband and I are looking at purchasing a small rural property in Mallorca next year. How easy is it to transfer an existing licence from the previous owners into our name? And is there any particular process that we need to start considering now in view of the new regulations?
If you buy a property with a license, which has already been applied for a license, so there is no problem. So you notify only the chain of the ownership when you buy the property.
Okay.
But the license always connected with the asset, not with the ownership. So the asset has a license. So the asset, every time the asset is transferred, is sold to someone else, the person who buys it has to notify that I am the new owner of that property. And the new law say also that you can register it in the register of property, the license.
Okay, thank you. And one other quick question, if I may. We're currently renovating a property in the old town of Pollença, which we're planning on selling early next year, and that's always been our intention. Our earlier intention was to get a licence on the property to obviously sell that as another benefit to the property, which obviously we can't do just yet. Is there any speculation about the number of licences that will be granted in the old town of Pollença? My understanding is there's a lot of properties that are currently being rented in the old town. Is there a particular ceiling, do you think, maybe, in terms of the number of licences that will be allocated?
No, we talk about 40,000 places for whole Mallorca. So there is no speculations about what will happen so with the town of Pollença. So it's no, I cannot say to you to say. What is clear is that Pollença has approved last year. The Council of Pollença, Town Hall of Pollença, has approved a resolution last week saying that they will try to that Pollença be declared so as a positive area, the whole Pollença, the whole term of Pollença for multi-family houses and also for villas. But I assume also that, for example, in Pollença, in the rustic land, where there are a lot of houses with a license, That sort of license for rustic land will be reduced. Because when you see the map of licenses in Mallorca, you see Pollença completely crowded for licenses. Because in the tourist land, in the rustic land around Pollença, there are a lot of villas, because this phenomenon has been created here in Pollença in the 1950, 1960, when there was no hotels. People wanted to be here, but there was no places to stay. And that is when private people has decided to receive, to welcome so people at home. And so in Pollença, I think that in the coast, there will be no problems to obtain a license. In the city, no problems, but in the rustic land, I think that that will be not easy, because they think that there are too many licenses which have been given until now, and that is true.
I just want to know if you have a house,
you have a house.
On rustic land,
yeah,
and you have a casa de perros or another house on that land. How is the law going to apply to people renting and living on their property, on their land?
There is no, so in that sort of property, that there will be possible to make holiday or touristic stays for 60 days per year. If the area where the house is located is declared as a positive area, and you need, of course, the document of, what we say, the cédula de habitabilidad. So,
of both houses.
Exactly. So if this Casa de Perros has been reformed without license, you will not be able to obtain the cédula de habitabilidad. That is the document that you need to apply for holiday rental, for a license.
If you already have a license, will that license be forever then?
Yes.
It won't change. No matter if the land is, for example, close to a river or any of these.
The only thing is that you have applied for a license in the past, but maybe only for 6 persons, only for 8 persons. If you make the reform of Casa de Perros, and afterwards you have 4 more places, this house cannot be really covered by the old license.
Right.
Except
I'm talking about living in that property and renting out the main
living in that
house.
property and renting out, there is only the possibility for 60 days per year.
But you can, as an owner, live in a Casa de Perros and rent the main house out. That's not a problem.
If you have a license.
Yes, you have a license.
Yeah. Okay. You have a license.
We have to consider maybe specifically. Please.
Using social media as an owner and using any of the vocabulary to do with touristic, then obviously the responsibility is mine. But if I'm using social media and I'm not using vocabulary, touristic vocabulary, is that deemed to be a touristic channel?
No. If you use internet or you use Facebook or Twitter, now we have much more characters now. But you don't use any term of touristic or holiday. So in that case, you are not considered as a touristic channel. You are not covered by the touristic law.
As soon as I bought a property in Mallorca, I suddenly realised a lot of people tried to buy me, offered to buy me more drinks from local pub. I was getting Christmas cards from family members I never knew existed. So basically, my question is, how many friends and family am I allowed to lend my of course, not paying, of course, I wouldn't even dream of paying money on them, my property here.
Sorry, can I just add on to that? 'Cause it's one of the questions that I have that was sent to me from someone that can't make it. If friends and family come, can they make a donation towards electricity bills, etc., as a gift?
take cash.
It's not my question, it's from a client.
As far as you are not announced by the touristic ministry, you don't have any problem. And in that case, they open a file and it comes an inspector, and in that case, and only in that case, the owner has to be able to demonstrate that these visitors are friends, are family, are guests for other purposes, not for touristic purposes, you know. And we advise you to get all the information and documents for your guests also, to be able to demonstrate in front of the administration that you are not renting to tourists. If in reality you are renting to tourists, it is forbidden.
Without license.
Without license.
And very quickly, you said you cannot rent a property for more than a month, a tourist, illegally. Well, what happens if I have somebody who wants...
But that is, yes, that is correct what you say, but in fact, if you have someone who wants to be here 40 days, so you make 2 contracts.
No, but for say 2 months. Somebody wants to rent a property illegally for 2 months. Or 2 months holiday.
So 2 contracts. For 1 month,
2 1 month
another one
contracts.
for 1 month.
I'm not talking about allow now, I'm talking about the normal...
No, we talk about the touristic law.
Yes.
You make 2 contracts. For 1 month and for another one.
Well, you have to make a contract for over a month.
I have insisted on that point. I advise you to write a contract.
What sort of contract?
Huh?
What sort of contract?
A private contract.
Sorry?
I can send to you a
Private
A private contract.
A private contract. You don't have to go to the notary, yeah?
Okay.
I advise you to sign a written contract, always. Doesn't matter if you make seasonal contract or you make touristic contract. Always a touristic contract. And of course, if there is a limit for 1 month, if someone comes for 2 months, you make 1 contract and afterwards another contract.
Okay, thank you very much, Javier, Guillermo.